the garage and El Pelos too. Finally Sergio made up his mind to dig, and he decided to tear down a wall rather than have to move a great quantity of junk and scrap metal to get nearer the spot where he thought the gold was. Meanwhile El Pelos just smiled, and thought that under those conditions it was very difficult to dig. It was a junk pile of scrap metal. Meantime, one night when El Pelos was alone, he decided to move all the scrap metal from the area where the gold was supposedly located, and so he did. To remove and then replace the scrap took him almost 2 hours. To that he would have to add the time to remove the strips of wood, but he already had a plan, so very tired he went home to sleep. Days went by and finally El Pelos decided to speak to Sergio. He asked for permission to miss work on Monday, because he was taking his mother to see a doctor in Mexico City, but he said that in order to make up for the time, he would stay at work Saturday night and a great part of Sunday. Sergio accepted without objection his request. Saturday night El Pelos didn't drink any of his usual cubas, he drank only sodas and coffee. Everything went on as usual, and around 3 in the morning he was all alone again. Immediately he left what he was doing and started to remove the scrap metal. This took him a little more than 1 hour. Now it was time to remove part of the floor made of strips of wood. The hardest part was taking off the first one with only a common screwdriver. He paused to get a drink of coffee, as he was very hyper. In an effort to calm down, he lighted a cigarette. While he smoked, he thought that most likely he would not find anything. He didn't even have tools to remove the wooden ribbons, and worst of all, if he didn't place them back correctly, there would be suspicions and he may get fired. El Pelos lived in town with his mother in a very humble home, a wooden house with cardboard roofing, and besides, it was loaned to them and in great contrast to the modern neighboring houses. They had no stove or refrigerator. They really were extremely poor. El Pelos continued removing the floorboards, smiling with a mix of sadness and resignation. He had done another hour of work with very little progress. He had removed only a few wooden strips when suddenly, hidden between the supports of the floor joists, he saw a wooden box. He only had to remove another 2 ribbons in order to be able to remove the heavy box. He placed it on top of one of the work tables and proceeded to put the strips back in their place. Fortunately they fitted correctly, but just to be safe, he applied a little bit of burned oil on top of them with a broom, and then he replaced all the scrap metal. The place looked practically the same as before. He stopped to rest for a moment, took a sip of his coffee, placed the box in a sack and left the shop carrying his heavy burden and went home. Sergio kept on looking, digging, searching. Now it was his son who worked at night. El Pelos did not work there anymore. Some 5 months had gone by when walking through a downtown streets in town I saw El Pelos leaning on the door of a house belonging to a friend, who was among the wealthy in town. I stopped and greeted him. "How are you?" And I asked him, "Hey, what are you doing here? You do not go to the car shop anymore?" He answered me, "This is my house now, I live here with my mum and I don't go to the shop because I don't do any work now." So I added, "Where have you been?" And he answered smiling, "In Acapulco and other places, touring with my mum." El Pelos dressed in fancy clothes, wearing good shoes, with his teeth fixed and his hair combed, still with his ponytail, but he was a different man. Sergio remained the same, he was the boss in his shop. El Pelos and I met that evening next door to the car shop. It was a cenaduria, and we ate crispy fried tacos filled with shredded beef, with sour cream and covered with grated cheese and green salsa, tasty tamales and a sweet and delicious atole de pinole.